Thanks. Can everyone hear me? Okay, so before I start, Dieter and Co. and the organizers have asked me to inform you that the ticket cost of this event is 100% non-refundable, and that for the duration of my speech, this policy strictly does not permit leaving, heckling, shouting, throwing any objects whatsoever. Failure to adhere to these rules will result in immediate expulsion from the South African Institute of Industrial Engineers and possible legal action thereafter, as long as we're all clear. Okay. I know it's quite strange that they asked me to do that, but they seemed very serious at the time and said I could not speak unless I let you guys know that. Now that we've got that out of the way, I would like to say what a privilege and honor it is for me to be speaking at this event, despite the true fact, yes, nowadays you have to say true fact, despite the true fact that I neither deserve nor have the experience or qualification to do so. Trust me, this is not an aim at humility. My friends will tell you that I'm actually physically incapable of being so. My relatively short career has been punctuated more by near misses and occasional disasters than any tangible achievements worth mentioning, especially in this room. I narrowly avoided printing the ballot papers for one of the most violent and perhaps fraudulent elections in Africa's history. I led a 1,000-employee site during the only site explosion in our 100-year company's history in South Africa. I was a key member of a team, one of 10, that made a 600 million rand industrial engineering mistake. And most recently, I was forced to resign for spending 1.7 million rand sending a team of 30 factory people up a mountain during a travel ban. Furthermore, I'm not an industrial engineer or a professional engineer of any sort. So having formally declared and now apologize for my incompetence in speaking to you, I plan to use this opportunity to discuss 4 thoughts I had on what industrial engineering was, is, and possibly could be. These are not technical thoughts, they're conceptual ones. Actually, they're the opinions of a layman that hopes you will humor him with the effort to consider, challenge, and if you're feeling generous, reject with reason. First thought, industrial engineering is not mechanical engineering. You often find that most other engineering disciplines, especially mechanical engineers, will try to masquerade as industrial engineers. In fact, industrial engineering is so sexy that they're probably hiding amongst us right now. And to prove it, I've devised a quick test to snuff them out. How do you confuse a bunch of dodos? The answer is 7. If anyone's looking confused, he's a mechanical engineer, ask them to move out, please. The second thought that I'd like to discuss is that industrial engineering is the cancer of the South African society. The reason I say this, not only to be controversial, but because I think there's a concept behind it that would be hard to argue. My understanding is that cancer is a disease that results in the exponential multiplication of cells that have no use or function. The cancerous cells do not directly destroy functional cells. However, as they grow and spread, their burden on the body's functioning cells and organs that surround them eventually become unbearable, and as a consequence, systematically lead to the shutdown of those vital organs and systems that support the body as a whole. Whilst it might not be the intent of the cancerous gene to implode the very host it occupies, it is definitely a consequence, especially to the health, legislative, and administrative sectors. I'll explain. Today, we add 500,000 unemployed people in society every year. It is a true fact that the unchecked growth of this unemployment is exponentially burdening all organs of society. Having personally retrenched 120 people face-to-face and individually, and built 2 separate billion-rand facilities to replace them, I no longer believe the lie that we are saving jobs by becoming more globally competitive. The truth is, ever since automation has become more efficient than human participation in industry, The unintentional consequence of the industrial engineering gene is unemployment and eventual societal implosion. Every action of an industrial engineer inevitably leads to the unemployment because of the simple equation: humans equal inefficient robots. And while in the short term our competitive growth may secure a bigger piece of what's left of the global labor market, it is simply competing for a bigger piece of a shrinking pie. While I've been accused of being a socialist, I'm certainly pragmatic enough that I cannot be against progress. What I'm arguing is that we need to rethink, reparadigm our human value and contribution to that progress. And I feel the subsection of society who has the inclination and therefore must be mandated to lead this effort is much more our industrial engineers than any of our politicians. Which leads me to my next thought. Industrial engineers are obsolete. And I honestly believe this for two reasons, and I'll explain why. The first one is that the rate of technology change is ever increasing, that technologies are almost obsolete before they're implemented. And the opportunity for optimization is replaced by the urgency to adopt the next wave. If this is true, then the space for the industrial engineer is ever shrinking. Because generally, in my view, the industrial engineer focuses on this part of the technology adoption curve. And what that means is you take a new idea and you figure out how to do it at mass, and you figure out how to do it at better. And if the technology curve was that, your space in that element of the curve is ever shrinking. And I think the second reason, and probably the more compelling one, is that with the advent of machine learning and big data processing, computing is not only able to develop intuition to win the world's most complex board games. Soon, if I understand the total integration of Industry 4.0, computing will soon be able to develop correlation patterns through massive interaction loops and create improvement scenarios and implementation without ever having to understand the logic that delivers them. I don't know if that makes sense. And what I'm saying is the industrial engineer often looks at saying what is the logic that translates particular inputs into outputs. And what I'm saying is that computing is definitely going to replace that. Soon, they simply have, and computing simply have, the muscles to render logic irrelevant. And finally, and perhaps my most positive thought for the evening, is this idea that we must look far right because the left is obsolete. What I'm trying to say is that if you look at this, you see that our left sides of our brains are actually obsolete. That almost every part of the left side is now in the computing and big data realm. Machine learning will cover all of that. I truly believe that creativity is the final refuge of the human mind. And as industrial engineers, we need to find ways that creativity forms part of industry, that creativity on lines form the way that we can generate jobs and not reduce them. I'd like you to look at this particular checkerboard. It's a board that I saw many years ago in a lecture that I was being part of, and the presenter spent 5 minutes on this board. And what I'm trying to say is, if you look at industrial engineers, they're currently sitting in this paradigm. And if I asked you the question, is space A darker than space B, what would you say? Absolutely. So what I've done is I've printed these copies, And the reality is that space A and B are exactly the same color. It's not an illusion of an electronic illusion. It's a pigment. They are exactly the same color on the screen and on the pieces of paper that I can hand out that you can cut and put side to side. So what I'm saying, guys, is that if industrial engineers constantly improve automation, if they constantly simplify processes, then what they're actually doing is reducing the human value add capacity. And what we've got to do is find ways to return that. And as we march on, and unless we change our paradigms of what it means for industrial engineers to contribute to society, then we're part of the problem. This is what I'm actually talking about. I'm talking about lines, and humor me my blue sky thinking. The concept that I'd like to leave you with is perhaps this idea that I call augmented creativity. To say, how do we create lines that the creativity of humans can add value in a way that increases industrial production? That we may have operators as nodes that could come in and could create on the line and add production and maybe generate more jobs for our country. Thank you.